بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألف لام ميم ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين الذين يؤمنون بالله
رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على عبده ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. This is our second session reading from Makanat al-Sunnah, the status of the Sunnah, which we mentioned in the first session is a collegiate course that the students of the College of Hadith and Islamic Studies and the Islamic University take in their fourth semester. And one of the instructors of this course was Dr. Umar ibn Muslih al-Husayni, Hafidhullah ta'ala wa ra'ah. So in continuation of reading from his memorandum, he says here, Al-Matlab al-Thani, Makanat al-Muhaddithin fi al-Ummah. He says the second section is the status of the scholars of Hadith, the Muhaddithin or the Muhaddithun, which is commonly translated to be a traditionalist amongst the Ummah, the Muslim nation. We read in the last session the nobility and the honor and the virtue of studying the sciences of the Sunnah. Now we want to read about, bi'idhnillah azza wa jal, the status of the muhaddithin, the expert scholars and hadith doctors amongst the ummah. The Shaykh Hafidhullah ta'ala says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ بَعَثَ مُحَمَّدًا صلى الله عليه وسلم بِالْهُدَى وَدِينِ الْحَقِّ لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّهِ وَلَوْ كَرِهَ الْكَافِرُونَ. Verily Allah has sent Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam with the guidance and the true religion to make it manifest and predominant upon all other religions, even if the disbelievers may hate it. وَإِنَّ أَسْعَدَ النَّاسِ بِهَدِهِ وَاتِّبَاعِهِ وَوَحْيِهِ وَمُوَالَاتِهِ وَالنُّصْرَةِ مَا جَاءَ بِهِ مِنَ الْحَقِّ هُمْ صَحَابَتُهُ الْكِرَامِ. Verily, from the happiest of people, those who have the greatest portion of his guidance, his following him, his revelation that he came with and brought, showing allegiance and love to him, helping and supporting the truth that he has brought to the Ummah, are his noble companions. وَمَنْ اتَّبَعَهُمْ بِإِحْسَانٍ مِنَ الْقُرُونِ الْمُفَضَّلَةِ وَمَنْ سَلَكَ سَبِيلَهُمْ وَتَرَسَّمَ خُطَاهُمْ إِلَى يَوْمِ الدِّينِ. And those who followed them, those who follow his noble companions, those who follow them in goodness and perfection, from the preferred generations, the selected generations, and those who trod their path and took their way in their manner until the day of judgment. ثم إن المتأمل الدارس لأحوال الناس بعد أصحاب النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يتبين له بجلاء أن أقربهم لما كان عليه صلى الله عليه وسلم وأصحابه هم أهل الحديث. He says, and verily the one who reflects and he ponders and studies the situations of the people, of mankind, after the companions of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, it becomes very clear to him that the closest of these people to that which the Prophet ﷺ and his companions were upon, the closest of these people, the closest of mankind to the guidance of Muhammad ﷺ and his companions, he says they are Ahlul Hadith. They are the people of Hadith. فهم أحرص الناس على اقتفاء أثر النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وصحبه الكرام. They have the most eagerness from mankind to take the example of the Prophet ﷺ and his noble companions. وأشدهم عناية بجمع سننه. And they look after compiling and gathering his sunnah more than anyone else. وأحرصهم على اتباعها وتعظيمها. And they are the most diligent from mankind to follow the example of the Prophet ﷺ and to exalt it and respect and venerate the athar, the narration of the Prophet ﷺ and his noble companions. وقد تظاهرت الأحاديث النبوية والآثار السلفية على بيان فضلهم ومكانتهم وما اختصوا به واعتنى أهل العلم بجمع ذلك وتدوينه. He says, indeed, there are so many prophetic ahadith and narrations of the Salaf proving the virtue of Ahlul Hadith and their status and that which they have, which is a special merit for them besides anyone else. Many of the people of knowledge they have placed a great deal of importance in gathering all of this information and recording it and placing it in their different books and authored works. قال محمد بن طاهر المقدسي وقد صنف غير واحد من أئمتنا في هذا المعنى كتبا تشمل على مناقبهم. The Shaykh Hafidhullah Ta'ala says that Muhammad ibn Tahir al-Maqdisi, may Allah have mercy upon him, he said, there are many of our Imams have authored books about the virtues and the merits of Ahlul Hadith. وَمِمَّنْ اعْتَنَى بِذَلِكَ, from these scholars, those who wrote about the virtues of Ahlul Hadith and the scholars of Hadith and students of Hadith, he says, firstly, Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi is Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi, who died in the year 463 of the Islamic calendar of the Hijrah. في كتابه شرف أصحاب الحديث, and the book in which he wrote about the Ahlul Hadith and their virtue was his book called The Nobility of the People of Hadith. And we know that this is a very classical book that Imam Al-Khatib Khatib al-Baghdadi rahimahullah ta'ala wrote in defense of Ahlul Hadith, when there were many scholars in Baghdad, Iraq, from the fuqaha, those jurists or doctors of fiqh, and other types of the Islamic sciences and the Sharia. Many of them scorned Ahlul Hadith, and they looked down upon them. They disdained the students of Hadith. They spoke ill of them, and they saw that they were worthless. And there are countless narrations in which they made fun of them. So Imam al-Khatib rahimahullah ta'ala, and from these people, those were Muslims. Others weren't Muslims. They were munafiqeen, or people of zandaqa, hidden disbelievers or heretics, if you would say. So Imam al-Khatib rahimahullah ta'ala and others from these scholars were those who are madhabiyun, people who only knew of madhabs, and they knew of nothing of the sunnah and nothing of hadith, and they preferred the statements of fulan and allan over the statement of Abu al-Qasim sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So Al-Khatib rahimahullah ta'ala, he wrote this book and he quoted several of hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and narrations of the Sahaba and narrations of the Salaf, all types of poetry explaining the virtue and the nobility of hadith, studying it, and the people who bear this banner, Al-Hadith, Ashab al-Hadith. Then he says, number 2, Abu al-Muzaffar Mansur ibn Muhammad al-Sam'ani. He says the second one is Abu al-Muzaffar Mansur ibn Muhammad al-Sam'ani. He was well known as Imam al-Sam'ani. Imam al-Sam'ani, who died in the year 489 of the Hijrah. في كتابه الانتصار لأصحاب الحديث. He wrote a book that was titled Al-Intisar, standing up for the rights or standing up in defense for Ashab al-Hadith. ثالثا الحسن ابن عبد الرحمن الرامهرمزي المتوفى سنة 360 للهجرة في المحدث الفاصل بين الراوي والواعي في مقدمته والباب الأول والثاني منه. Thirdly is Al-Imam Abu Muhammad Al-Hasan ibn Abdul Rahman Al-Ramahurmazi. And Imam Al-Ramahurmazi died in the year 360 of the Hijrah. And the name of his book was called Al-Muhaddith Al-Fasil Bayn Al-Rawi Wal-Wa'i. He wrote in the introduction of this book, and he wrote in the first chapter of this book, the virtue of the students of Hadith, the virtue of the ulama of Hadith, and the scholars of Hadith. And we all know that this book is famous book, and it is the first book that was authored separately on Ilm al-Hadith. There are countless sources of Ilm al-Hadith from scholars who came before Imam Al-Ramahurmzi rahimahullah, from them of those who came in the 2nd century, and the 3rd century, before the 4th century. Rather, we know Ilm al-Hadith is established in the Quran and in the authentic Sunnah, and what the companions were upon, and how they dealt with the asanid, and looked into the narrators, and so on and so forth. However, his book was the very first book that was mustaqil, that was separately authored or written on Ilm al-Hadith. So in this book, he spoke about the virtue and the knowledge of the muhaddithin. Number 4, Abu Abdullah al-Hakim في معرفة علوم الحديث في أوله. He says, thirdly is the great scholar Abu Abdullah al-Hakim from Naysabur, in his book Ma'rifatu Ulum al-Hadith, which was one of the very first books also written separately on Ilm al-Hadith. His book called Ma'rifatu Ulum al-Hadith. In the very beginning of his book, al-Hakim, he quoted different narrations from them, the Prophet ﷺ's statements about the safe sect and the Taif al-Mansur or the Firqa Najiyah, and the statements of Imam Ahmad and others, how they dealt with the people who looked down upon Ahlul Hadith and Ashab al-Hadith. And Imam al-Hakim, rahimahullah ta'ala, if my memory serves me correctly, died in the year 405 of the Hijrah. He says, number 5, Abu Ali ibn al-Banna المتوفى سنة 471 للهجرة صنف في شرف أصحاب الحديث. He says Imam Abu Ali, or he says Abu Ali ibn al-Banna, who died in the year 471. He wrote a book called The Nobility of the People.